A woman collapsed on a marble floor at 3 in the morning, gasping for breath while an invisible machine wrapped around her wrist burned her skin for the crime of stopping to breathe. Above her stood a crime lord worth $300 million, who suddenly realized the worst violence in his empire wasn't happening in back alleys or drug houses. It was happening right here, under fluorescent kitchen lights, disguised as employee management. This is the story of Serafina Vale, a woman who crossed a border searching for safety and found herself trapped inside a technological nightmare that turned her own body into a prison. If you want to see how far survival can bend a human soul before it breaks completely, stay until the end. Like this video, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. And let's begin. Rain hit the windows of the Valamon estate like fists against glass. Not gentle, not poetic, just cold water hammering old stone in the kind of relentless rhythm that made sleep impossible for anyone unlucky enough to still be awake at 2:13 in the morning. Serafina Vale was awake. She had been awake for 19 hours. Her knees ached against the ballroom's black marble floor as she scrubbed at a wine stain that had already dried into the stone grain hours ago. Her right hand moved in tight, furious circles while her left braced her weight. The rag in her grip smelled like bleach and something sharper, something chemical that burned the back of her throat every time she inhaled. She didn't slow down. Slowing down hurt worse than the burning in her lungs. The matte black band locked around her left wrist buzzed once, a warning. She felt it vibrate against bone before her brain fully registered what it meant. Her body knew faster than her mind. Her hand moved quicker, pressing harder into the stain, scrubbing with mechanical precision even though her muscles screamed. The buzzing stopped. Serafina exhaled carefully, slowly, like someone diffusing a bomb with their breath. From the shadows near the doorway, Ronan Drax watched her with the kind of stillness that came from 20 years of deciding who lived and who disappeared. He stood 6'3" in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people earned in 6 months, arms crossed, face unreadable. His dark hair was graying at the temples in that way people called distinguished when you had money and dangerous when you didn't. He had built an empire that stretched across 3 continents, controlled shipments that moved through ports in 14 countries, owned politicians, judges, entire police departments. He had watched men beg for their lives, watched them break, watched them die. But watching Serafina scrub that floor made something in his chest tighten in a way violence never had. It wasn't the scrubbing itself. It was the way she moved, too fast, too rigid, like her body had forgotten it was allowed to stop. The bracelet buzzed again. Serafina's breath hitched. Her hand jerked harder across the marble, fingernails catching against the stone edge. The rag slipped. She grabbed it with shaking fingers and kept scrubbing, faster now, desperate. Ronan saw the fear flash across her face before she buried it. He had seen that look before, a long time ago. On his mother's face when his father came home late, smelling like bourbon and someone else's perfume. The look of someone whose body had learned that stillness equaled punishment. Serafina didn't know Ronan was watching. She thought she was alone in the enormous ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked gardens she had never walked through in daylight. She thought no one saw her at 2 in the morning on her knees scrubbing stains that would be invisible by sunrise. She was wrong. Ronan had been noticing things. Small things at first. The way Serafina ate standing up in the kitchen corner, always moving, shifting her weight from foot to foot even while chewing. The way she never sat down during her 15-minute lunch breaks. The way her left hand unconsciously rubbed her right wrist during staff meetings, fingers tracing the edge of that black band like it was a scar she couldn't stop touching. He had assumed it was some kind of fitness tracker. Everyone wore them now. Tech companies marketed the hell out of them. Count your steps, monitor your heart rate, optimize your life. But fitness trackers didn't make people flinch. They didn't make grown women look terrified when they vibrated. Serafina finished scrubbing the stain and stood up slowly, carefully, testing her balance like someone recovering from a beating. She was 31 years old but moved like she was 60. Her dark hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it looked painful. Her uniform, black slacks, white button-down, black vest, hung loose on her frame in a way that suggested she had lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. She gathered her cleaning supplies, moving with practiced efficiency toward the supply closet at the far end of the ballroom. The bracelet buzzed again. Longer this time. Serafina stumbled, Her knee hit the marble hard enough that Ronan heard the impact from 30 feet away. She didn't cry out. That was the part that made his jaw tighten. She didn't make a sound, just pushed herself upright and kept moving, faster now, almost jogging toward the closet with the bucket sloshing chemical water against her legs. Ronan watched her disappear through the doorway. Then he walked across the ballroom, his Italian leather shoes silent against the stone, and followed her. The supply closet smelled like industrial lemon cleaner and mildew. Serafina was shoving bottles back onto metal shelves with shaking hands when she felt someone behind her. She turned too fast. Ronan stood in the doorway, blocking most of the light from the hallway. For 3 seconds, neither of them spoke. Serafina's entire body went rigid. She dropped her gaze immediately, staring at the floor like she had been trained. "I'm sorry, Mr. Drax. I didn't realize you were still awake. I'll be finished in just a few minutes." "Stop." His voice wasn't loud. That made it worse somehow. Serafina stopped talking mid-sentence, hands frozen halfway to a shelf. Ronan stepped into the closet. It was a small space, too small for 2 people. He could see the sweat on her forehead, the way her chest rose and fell too quickly, the barely healed burn marks peeking out from beneath the black bracelet on her wrist. "How long have you been awake?" he asked. She blinked, confused. I'm not sure what you mean. How long?" Serafina's throat worked. "Since 5 yesterday morning. 19 hours. Ronan's expression didn't change, but something dark and cold settled behind his eyes. "When's your last meal?" "I ate during my lunch break." "When's your last meal where you sat down?" She didn't answer that. He looked at the bracelet on her wrist. "What is that thing?" Serafina's hand moved instinctively to cover it. Protective. "It's a wellness tracker. All the staff have them. It's part of the new health initiative Ms. Whitmore implemented. It monitors productivity and—" "Does it shock you?" Silence. The kind of silence that confirmed everything. Serafina's face went carefully blank. She had perfected that expression over 4 months of survival. It provides compliance corrections when performance metrics aren't met. It's completely safe, FDA approved. Miss Whitmore explained everything when we signed the consent forms. "Show me your wrist." "Mr. Drax, I really need to finish." "Show me your wrist or I'll call Celeste down here right now and ask her myself." That threat worked. Serafina went pale. Her hand trembled as she slowly pulled back the sleeve of her shirt and twisted her arm to reveal the inside of her wrist. The burn marks were fresh, red and blistered where the electrodes made contact with skin. Some were healing. Others looked new, inflamed, infected. Ronan stared at them for a long time. Then he lifted his gaze to Serafina's face. "How many other people are wearing these?" "7 of us," she whispered. "All women?" She nodded. "All immigrants?" Another nod. Ronan's jaw clenched hard enough that she heard his teeth click together. He stepped back, giving her space, giving her air. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, dangerously quiet. "Go to your room, sleep. I'll handle the rest of the cleaning tonight." Serafina's eyes went wide. "I can't. The schedule says—" "Well, I don't care what the schedule says. Ms. Whitmore checks the logs every morning, and if I don't finish, I'll deal with Celeste." The bracelet buzzed. Serafina jerked like she'd been slapped. Her breathing quickened, panic rising fast and sharp. "Please, Mr. Drax, I just need to finish the ballroom and then the east hallway, and if I can just—" Ronan watched her spiral. Watched fear override reason, watched months of conditioning erase logic in real time. He had seen this before too. He reached out slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. "Serafina, look at me." She dragged her gaze up from the floor. "You're not in trouble," he said. "Do you understand?" She nodded, but he could see she didn't believe him. "Go to your room," he repeated. "Lock the door. Sleep. No one is going to punish you." The bracelet buzzed again, longer this time, harder. Serafina's face crumpled. "I can't stop moving. If I stop for too long, it—" Ronan pulled a folding knife from his pocket. Serafina's breath caught. She took a step back, hitting the shelf behind her hard enough to rattle bottles. He flipped the blade open and held out his hand. "Give me your wrist." She stared at him like he had just asked her to jump off a building. "Serafina, give me your wrist." Slowly shaking so hard her whole arm vibrated, she extended her left hand. Ronan slid the blade beneath the black band, angled it away from her skin, and cut through the reinforced polymer in one clean motion. The bracelet hit the concrete floor with a small, insignificant sound. For 5 seconds, Serafina just stared at it. Then she started crying. Not softly, not gracefully. 4 months of fear and exhaustion and pain erupted out of her in violent, choking sobs that shook her whole body. She collapsed against the metal shelf, legs giving out, hands covering her face. Ronan stood there, knife still open in his hand, watching her break apart. He didn't touch her, didn't try to calm her down, just stood between her and the door, blocking anyone else from seeing, giving her the space to shatter in private. It took almost 10 minutes for the sobs to slow. When Serafina finally lowered her hands, her face was swollen and blotchy, her eyes bloodshot. She looked at the bracelet on the floor like it might come back to life. "Go to your room," Ronan said again. Gentler this time. "Sleep. When you wake up, come find me. We'll talk." She nodded. Couldn't speak. Stumbled past him into the hallway on legs that barely held her weight. Ronan watched her go. Then he bent down, picked up the broken bracelet, and turned it over in his hands. The inside was marked with serial numbers, a manufacturer's logo, technical specifications printed in tiny font along the battery casing. He slipped it into his pocket. Then he walked through the silent mansion toward Celeste Whitmore's office on the 3rd floor, his footsteps echoing against marble like a countdown. Celeste was still awake. She was always awake. The woman ran on 4 hours of sleep and controlled everything in the estate with terrifying efficiency. Her office door was closed, but light showed beneath the gap. Ronan knocked once and walked in without waiting for permission. Celeste looked up from her laptop, perfectly composed, even at 3 a.m. She was 42, attractive in that sharp, expensive way that came from personal trainers and dermatologists. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a flawless twist. Her cream silk blouse looked freshly pressed. "Ronan, I wasn't expecting you," she smiled. Professional, warm. "Is everything all right?" He closed the door behind him and set the broken bracelet on her desk. Celeste's smile didn't waver, but something shifted behind her eyes. "What is this?" Ronan asked. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't." His voice was flat, cold. "I just cut this off Serafina Vale's wrist after watching it shock her for slowing down. So I'm going to ask you one more time, very clearly, what the hell is this thing?" Celeste sat back in her chair, assessing, calculating. She had worked for the Drax family for 6 years, had proven herself invaluable during expansion into new territories, had streamlined operations, increased efficiency, reduced overhead. She decided honesty, or at least a version of it, was her best move. "It's a workforce optimization system," she said calmly, "designed to increase productivity and reduce waste. The staff who wear them agreed to participate in a pilot program. Everything was completely voluntary. They signed consent forms. Consent forms written in English for women who barely speak the language. They had translators you hired." Celeste's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The program has been incredibly effective. Task completion rates are up 40%. Overtime costs are down. The staff are more focused, more efficient. The staff are terrified. They're disciplined." Ronan leaned forward, planting both hands on her desk. "You've been shocking women for moving too slowly, for resting, for being human. I've been implementing performance standards by torturing them, by holding them accountable." Celeste's voice sharpened. "Do you have any idea how much money this estate wastes on labor inefficiency? How many hours are lost to extended breaks, unnecessary socializing, general laziness? This system eliminates that. It creates structure, order, excellence." Ronan stared at her, really looked at her, saw the absolute conviction in her eyes, the genuine belief that she had built something valuable. She actually thought she was helping. That made it worse somehow. "Who else knows about this?" he asked quietly. "It's my program. I manage it entirely." "Does my father know?" "Your father hired me to optimize operations. This is optimization." "Does he know?" Celeste hesitated, just for a second. "He's aware that I've implemented new productivity systems, yes," which meant no. His father didn't know. The old man was too busy running smuggling routes through Southeast Asia to pay attention to household management, Ronan straightened. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me access to every piece of data that system collected, every shock, every punishment, every dollar deducted from their paychecks. You're going to provide me with copies of those consent forms, and you're going to explain to me exactly how this program was funded and who approved it. Ronan, I understand you're upset, but if you'll just let me show you the performance metrics, you have 2 hours. Celeste went still. Excuse me? 2 hours to compile everything I just asked for. After that, I'm calling the Department of Labor and Immigration and the FBI. Her face drained of color. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. This estate operates in legally gray areas every single day, Celeste said, voice rising now, control slipping. Your family business is built on illegal activity. You're going to destroy my program over employee management while you run drugs through 3 countries? Yes, Ronan said simply, because my business doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. You tortured women and called it wellness. You stole from them and called it accountability. You built a prison and called it optimization. He turned toward the door. Wait. 2 hours, he said without looking back. Don't make me come find you. He walked out, closing the door quietly behind him. The mansion felt different now. Like walking through a crime scene he had been living inside without realizing. Every corner held something he had missed. Every shadow hid something worse. Ronan walked to his private office on the 2nd floor, locked the door, and started making phone calls. First to his head of security, then to his personal lawyer, then to someone who specialized in making problems disappear. Though this time, Ronan wanted the opposite. He wanted everything documented, everything exposed. At 4:47 a.m., his laptop pinged with an email from Celeste. The subject line read, Requested Documentation. Ronan opened it. 37 attachments, spreadsheets, PDFs, performance logs, shock frequency graphs, financial records showing paycheck deductions labeled as equipment fees and productivity fines. He opened the consent forms first. They were in English, dense legal English. Buried on page 6 of a 12-page document was a single paragraph in 8-point font that mentioned bioelectric feedback mechanisms for performance enhancement. None of the women who signed them spoke English fluently. All of them came from countries where questioning authority meant deportation. Ronan opened the financial records next. Over 4 months, Celeste's program had deducted $47,000 from 7 women's paychecks. The money was funneled through a shell company Celeste had set up personally. From there, it disappeared into accounts Ronan would need forensic accountants to trace. She had been stealing from them, not just controlling them, stealing. His phone buzzed. A text from his head of security. You need to see the basement server room. Ronan stood, grabbed his jacket, and headed downstairs. The server room was behind a locked door near the wine cellar. His security chief, Marcus, ex-military, built like a brick wall, was waiting outside with a tablet in his hands. You're not going to like this, Marcus said. They went inside. The room was small, climate-controlled, filled with humming black servers. On the largest monitor, a map glowed with 7 blinking red dots representing the bracelets. 6 were clustered in the staff quarters. 1 was offline. That was Serafina's. Marcus pulled up another screen. This is the shock log from the past week. Ronan stared at the data. Serafina had been shocked 247 times in 7 days, an average of 35 times per day. Some shocks lasted 3 seconds. Others lasted 10. Jesus Christ, Ronan whispered. Marcus scrolled down. There's more. The system also tracks sleep patterns. Look at Serafina's. The sleep graph was almost flat. Average sleep per night, 2 hours and 14 minutes. The system punished deep sleep, punished REM cycles, conditioned her body to never fully rest. It's torture, Marcus said quietly. Technical torture, clean, no visible marks except the burns. Ronan's hands clenched into fists. Pull all the data, everything. I want copies stored off-site within the hour. Already done. Good. Ronan turned to leave, then stopped. Marcus, find out if Celeste has backup systems, redundancies, cloud storage. I want everything destroyed. And the bracelets? Collect them. All of them. Cut them off personally if you have to. I don't want anyone shocked again. Marcus nodded. What about Celeste? Ronan looked at the blinking map on the screen, at the red dots representing women who thought they had no choice but to endure. I'm handling Celeste personally. The sun was starting to rise when Ronan finally made it back upstairs. Golden light bled through the windows, soft and warm, and completely at odds with the fury building in his chest. He found Celeste exactly where he expected, still in her office, surrounded by packed boxes. She looked up when he entered. Her face was composed, but he could see the cracks now, the fear beneath the professionalism. I've prepared my resignation, she said. Effective immediately. I'll be out of the estate by noon. No. Celeste blinked. I'm sorry? You're not resigning. You're being fired. For cause. Which means no severance, no reference, no quiet exit. Her composure fractured. Ronan, please. I'm reporting this program to federal investigators. Labor trafficking, wage theft, unlawful surveillance. They'll want to talk to you. This will destroy my career. You destroyed 7 women's lives. I was trying to help. Stop. Ronan's voice cut through her excuses like a blade. Don't insult both of us by pretending this was anything other than what it was. You saw vulnerable women. You saw an opportunity. You exploited them, and you called it innovation. Celeste stood, shaking now. Your family commits crimes every single day. You have no moral high ground here. You're right, Ronan said. I don't. I'm a criminal. I've hurt people, killed people, but I've never pretended to be anything else. You built a torture system and wrapped it in corporate language. You made them think it was their fault for not being good enough. That's worse. I want a lawyer. Get one. You'll need several. He walked to the door, then paused. You have 6 hours to be gone. If you're still here after that, I'll have Marcus escort you out. And Celeste? Every dollar you stole will be returned, with interest. I'll make sure of it. He left her standing alone in her perfect office, surrounded by the ruins of her perfect system. By noon, Celeste Whitmore was gone. Marcus and his team had collected all 6 remaining bracelets, cutting them off personally and documenting every burn, every scar, every woman's testimony. The servers were wiped. The data was secured off-site. Ronan gathered the staff in the main kitchen, all 23 of them, including the 7 women who had been part of Celeste's program. He spoke in English first, then Spanish, then had Marcus translate into Portuguese for the 2 Brazilian housekeepers. He told them the truth. The bracelet program was illegal. Celeste was gone. The stolen wages would be returned. No one would be punished. No one would be deported. Their immigration status was secure. Most of them cried. Some just stared, unable to process that the nightmare was actually over. Serafina stood at the back of the room, her wrist bandaged, her eyes still hollow with exhaustion. She watched Ronan speak but didn't seem to fully believe what she was hearing. Trust took longer than truth. After the meeting ended, Ronan caught her before she left. Can we talk? He asked. Privately? She nodded, following him to the small study off the main library. It was a quiet room. Books, leather chairs, windows overlooking the garden. Ronan gestured to a chair. Sit, please. Serafina sat carefully, like her body had forgotten how. He sat across from her. I need to ask you some questions about what happened. For the investigators. Is that okay? Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. Ronan pulled out a small notebook. How did Celeste recruit you? Serafina's hands twisted together in her lap. Through an agency in Tijuana. They promised legal work permits, good wages, safe housing. I sent them my information. 2 weeks later, they offered me a position here. Did they mention the bracelets? Not until I arrived. Celeste said it was new technology, a trial program. She said if I participated, I'd get a bonus. Her voice cracked. I needed the money. My son, he's 6. He lives with my mother in Guadalajara. I send them everything I earn. Did she threaten you? Serafina's jaw tightened. Not at first. At first she was kind, professional. She explained the bracelet would track my movements, my productivity, my health. She said it was like a fitness tracker, but better, more advanced. When did it change? After the first week, I was tired. I sat down during a break for too long. The bracelet shocked me. I thought it was a malfunction. I told Celeste. She said it was working correctly. She said I had violated productivity standards. Ronan wrote everything down. His handwriting was tight, controlled. What did she say about your immigration status? Serafina's eyes filled with tears. She said the work visa was conditional, that if my performance dropped, I could be deported. She said the bracelet monitored everything, that if I complained or tried to remove it, the system would flag me. I was terrified. I have a record from when I was 19, nothing serious, just a minor theft charge. But Celeste knew about it. She said it made me high risk, that I was lucky to even be here. Your visa isn't conditional, Ronan said gently. It's a standard H-2B, completely legitimate. And a minor charge from over 10 years ago doesn't affect it. Serafina covered her face with her hands. She lied. Yes. About everything. Yes. The sobs came again, quieter this time, but deeper. Ronan waited. Let her cry. Let her process. When she finally looked up, her face was ravaged, but something had shifted in her eyes. Anger, raw and new and unfamiliar. I want to help, she said, with the investigation. I want to make sure she can't do this to anyone else. Are you sure? It won't be easy. You'll have to testify. Relive it. I'm sure, Ronan nodded. Then I'll make sure you have the best lawyers and protection. No one touches you. Understand? She nodded. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, birds sang in the garden. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. Why did you notice? Serafina asked suddenly. No one else did. Why you? Ronan leaned back in his chair, eyes distant. Because I know what fear looks like when it's been trained into someone. I grew up watching it. I swore I'd never ignore it again. But you're... She stopped herself. A criminal? He smiled without humor. Yeah, I am. Doesn't mean I'm blind. Serafina studied him, really looked at him. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. Recovery takes time. She nodded slowly. I know. Ronan stood. Get some rest. Real rest. Tomorrow we'll start putting everything back together. She left quietly, moving through the mansion like she was learning how to walk in her own skin again. Ronan stayed in the study, staring out at the garden as afternoon light turned everything gold. Somewhere in his estate, 6 women were learning they were free. Somewhere in the city, Celeste Whitmore was learning she wasn't. And somewhere deep in his chest, Ronan felt something unfamiliar stir. Not redemption, not absolution, but maybe the beginning of understanding that power meant nothing if you didn't know when to wield it and when to break the systems that shouldn't exist. He pulled out his phone and made one more call. Marcus, I want background checks on every recruitment agency we've ever used, every contractor, every vendor. If there are more systems like this operating anywhere near my family's business, I want them found. Understood. And Marcus, expand the search. I want to know if Celeste ran this program anywhere else. Other estates, other employers. Find everyone she hurt. That could take months. Then we have months of work ahead of us. Ronan hung up and walked back toward his office, his footsteps echoing through halls that felt less like home and more like a puzzle he was only now beginning to solve. One dark piece at a time. 3 days after Celeste disappeared, Serafina woke up at 4:47 a.m. in a cold sweat, her left hand clutching her right wrist where the bracelet used to be. The phantom buzzing had returned. She lay in the narrow bed in her staff quarters, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the shock that never came. Her brain knew the bracelet was gone, cut apart, destroyed. But her nervous system hadn't gotten the message yet. It still flinched at imaginary vibrations, still flooded her bloodstream with adrenaline at random intervals throughout the night. She sat up slowly, testing her body's response. Her legs felt heavy. Her back ached. 4 months of sleeping in 2-hour increments had rewired something fundamental in her circadian rhythm. Now that she was allowed to sleep, her body didn't remember how. Outside her window, the estate grounds were still dark. She could see the outline of the garden, the stone pathways, the fountain that never turned off. Peaceful. Quiet. Safe. She didn't trust it. Serafina got dressed in the dark. Black slacks, white shirt, comfortable shoes instead of the regulation ones Celeste had required. Her fingers trembled as she buttoned the shirt, Muscle memory screamed at her to move faster, to get downstairs, to start working before someone noticed her delay. No one was coming. She repeated it to herself like a mantra. No one was coming, no one was watching, no one would punish her. But the mantra didn't stop her hands from shaking. She left her room and walked down the empty hallway toward the kitchen. The mansion felt different at this hour. Bigger somehow, colder. Every shadow held the ghost of Celeste's presence. The clicking of her heels against marble, the sharp tone of her voice during inspections, the way she smiled while delivering criticism that felt like blades. The kitchen was empty when Serafina arrived. She turned on the lights, filled the coffee maker, and started pulling ingredients from the industrial refrigerator for breakfast prep. Her body moved on autopilot. Crack eggs, dice vegetables, measure flour. Halfway through chopping onions, her wrist started buzzing again. Not real, just her nerves misfiring. The knife slipped. Knife. Blood bloomed across her left index finger, bright red against pale skin. Serafina stared at it for 3 full seconds before the pain registered. Then she grabbed a kitchen towel and pressed it against the cut, applying pressure the way she'd been taught. "You're bleeding." She spun around. Ronan stood in the kitchen doorway wearing dark sweatpants and a gray t-shirt that looked slept in. His hair was messy, his face was shadowed with stubble. He looked human in a way she'd never seen before, less like the terrifying crime lord who controlled everything and more like a man who'd also woken up too early for reasons he didn't want to examine. "It's just a small cut," Serafina said quickly, hiding her hand behind her back. "I wasn't paying attention. It won't affect breakfast service." "Stop." She stopped. Ronan walked over to the first aid kit mounted near the sink, pulled it down, and gestured to the counter. "Sit." "I can handle it." "Sit down, Serafina." She sat. He unwrapped her hand carefully, examined the cut under the bright kitchen lights. It wasn't deep, but it was long, running diagonally across her finger from nail to knuckle. He cleaned it with antiseptic, applied antibiotic ointment, wrapped it in gauze. His hands were gentle, precise, nothing like she expected from a man who'd built an empire on violence. "You should still be sleeping," he said without looking up. "I couldn't." "The phantom shocks?" She nodded. Ronan secured the bandage with medical tape. "It'll take time. Your nervous system needs to recalibrate. Weeks, probably. Maybe months." "How do you know?" He met her eyes. "I've seen it before. Different context. Same symptoms." She wanted to ask, but didn't. The grief in his voice made it clear the story wasn't one he wanted to tell. Ronan stepped back, giving her space. "You don't need to be down here this early. The new schedule doesn't start until 7. I don't know what to do with myself if I'm not working." The confession slipped out before she could stop it. Ronan leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to?" Serafina thought about it, really thought. "I don't remember." "Not since you got here?" "Not since before my son was born." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy. "There's a library on the 2nd floor," Ronan said finally. "East wing. Books in 6 languages, including Spanish. Take whatever you want." "I'm not much of a reader." "Then sit in there and do nothing, stare at the ceiling, sleep on the couch. I don't care. Just stop treating rest like it's something you have to earn." Serafina's throat tightened. "Why are you being kind to me?" Ronan's expression darkened. Not with anger, with something older, sadder. "Because no one was kind to someone I loved when she needed it, and I'm tired of watching history repeat itself." Before she could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Marcus appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, his face grim. "We have a problem." Ronan straightened immediately. "What kind?" "The kind that involves your father." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Ronan's jaw tightened. "My office. Now." He looked at Serafina. "Get that finger looked at properly if it starts bleeding through the bandage." "I mean it." Then he was gone, following Marcus down the hallway with the kind of controlled urgency that made Serafina's survival instincts scream warnings she didn't understand yet. She sat alone in the kitchen, holding her bandaged hand, wondering what kind of problem could make a man like Ronan Drax look worried. Upstairs in his private office, Ronan closed the door and locked it. Marcus set the tablet on the desk, pulling up a series of emails. "Your father found out about Celeste. Marcus said flatly. Ronan's hands curled into fists. How? She called him, directly, last night around 11. What did she tell him? Marcus tapped the screen. According to the call logs, they spoke for 47 minutes. Then your father sent these. The first email was brief, direct, written in his father's trademark style. No pleasantries, just demands. Subject: immediate explanation required, Ronan. Celeste Whitmore contacted me regarding her termination. She claims you dismantled a performance optimization program without consultation and threatened her with federal prosecution over legally implemented efficiency measures. I want a full report on my desk by noon tomorrow explaining why you destroyed a system that was saving this estate $200,000 annually. And I want to know why I'm hearing about major operational changes from terminated employees instead of my own son. We'll discuss this in person when I return from Singapore on Friday. Victor Ronan read it twice. His father's words were measured, but the threat underneath them was clear. Victor Drax didn't tolerate insubordination, not from business partners, not from enemies, and definitely not from family. The second email had arrived 20 minutes later. Subject: clarification. Additional information has come to light regarding the nature of Celeste's program. I've reviewed her documentation. The system showed impressive results. If you had concerns about implementation, you should have brought them to me before taking unilateral action. Terminating valued employees and threatening legal consequences without consultation demonstrates poor judgment and worse leadership. Friday. My office. 9 a.m. sharp. This conversation is not optional. Ronan set the tablet down carefully. Too carefully, like he was afraid he might put his fist through it. He doesn't know, Marcus said quietly. About the torture, the stolen wages, the conditioning. Celeste didn't tell him any of that. Of course she didn't. Ronan's voice was ice. She sent him the performance metrics, the cost savings, the efficiency reports. Made herself look like an innovator I fired out of incompetence. What are you going to do? Ronan walked to the window, staring out at the grounds as dawn broke over the estate. Golden light touched everything, the gardens, the fountain, the high walls that surrounded the property like a fortress. A prison disguised as paradise, just like Celeste's system. I'm going to tell him the truth, Ronan said. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You know he won't care. I know. Victor built this empire by exploiting vulnerabilities. He's going to see Celeste's program as effective resource management, not abuse. I know that too. Then why? Because I need him to hear it anyway. Ronan turned away from the window. I need him to know that I see what he's built here, what we've all built, and I'm done pretending it's acceptable just because it's profitable. Marcus studied him carefully. You're picking a fight you can't win. Probably. He could cut you out, redirect operations, make you irrelevant. Let him try. The certainty in Ronan's voice made Marcus take a step back. He'd worked for the Drax family for 8 years, watched Ronan grow from his father's volatile apprentice into a calculated strategist who ran half the family's operations across 2 continents. But this was different. This was personal in a way business never was. What do you need from me? Marcus asked. Documentation. Everything we pulled from Celeste's servers, shock logs, financial records, medical reports from the women, testimony. I want it organized into a presentation I can't be talked around. Done. Anything else? Ronan's expression hardened. Find out if my father knew. I want phone records, email chains, anything connecting him to Celeste's program before I fired her. If he approved this, I need proof. Marcus nodded and left. Ronan sat down at his desk and pulled up the staff files. 7 women, 7 stories. 7 lives Celeste had systematically destroyed while Victor paid her bonuses for cutting costs. He opened Serafina's file first. Name: Serafina Isabel Vale, age 31. Citizenship: Mexico. Visa. Status: H-2B. Valid through March 2027. Employment: start date: January 14th, 2026. Position: housekeeping staff. Emergency contact: Rosa Maria Vale, mother, Guadalajara. Dependents: Diego Vale, Son, age 6. Beneath the official information, Celeste had added her own notes in a separate document. Subject demonstrates high compliance potential. Limited English proficiency reduces risk of external reporting. Prior minor criminal record creates vulnerability to deportation threats despite legal status. Financial pressure, dependent child, ensures motivation. Recommended for Phase 1 implementation. Ronan read it 3 times. Celeste hadn't seen a person. She'd seen a profile, a collection of vulnerabilities to exploit, and she'd been rewarded for it with salary increases and operational control. The other 6 files were identical, different names, same cold calculation. Ana Ruiz, 27, Guatemala, supporting 3 younger siblings. Carmen Santos, 34, Honduras, sending money to disabled parents. Lucia Mendez, 29, El Salvador, fled domestic violence. Isabella Moreno, 25, Mexico, pregnant when hired, miscarried in month 2. Sofia Torres, 38, Nicaragua, widowed, sole provider for 2 daughters. Valentina Cruz, 41, Colombia, recovering from cancer, needed steady income for medical debt. Every single one of them chosen specifically because they had no safety net. No one to advocate for them, nowhere else to go. Ronan closed the files and pressed his palms against his eyes until he saw stars. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Celeste. We need to talk. Please call me." He deleted it without responding. 2 minutes later, another text arrived. "I know you're angry. I understand, but you don't have all the facts. Your father approved my program. I have documentation. If you push this investigation, you'll destroy more than just me." Ronan stared at the message. She was threatening him, subtly, carefully. But it was a threat. He typed a response. "Forward the documentation to my lawyer. If my father was involved, he'll answer for it too." Her reply came instantly. "You don't mean that? Try me." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "You're making a mistake." Ronan put the phone down and didn't answer. The next 3 days passed in a haze of preparation and tension. Marcus compiled everything into a comprehensive presentation. 63 slides of evidence that turned Celeste's performance optimization into a documented case of labor trafficking and systematic abuse. The staff slowly began to adjust, some faster than others. Ana started smiling again. Carmen joined the other housekeepers for lunch instead of eating alone. Lucia actually took her scheduled day off, but Isabella couldn't sleep without sedatives. Sophia jumped every time someone entered a room. Valentina refused to take the bandage off her wrist even after the burns healed, and Serafina kept waking up at 4:47 a.m., waiting for shocks that never came. Ronan found her in the library on Wednesday afternoon, curled up in a leather chair near the window with a book open in her lap that she clearly wasn't reading. "Good book?" he asked from the doorway. She looked up, startled. "I haven't gotten past the first page." "Mind if I sit?" She shook her head. Ronan settled into the chair across from her. For a while, neither of them spoke. Outside, rain started falling again, gentler this time, steady and rhythmic instead of violent. "My father arrives tomorrow," Ronan said finally. Serafina closed the book. "Will he fire you?" "Maybe." "Because of us?" "Because I challenged him." She processed that. "What happens to us if he does?" "Nothing. Your employment status doesn't change regardless of what happens to me. I made sure of it legally. You're protected. But the investigation continues either way. I have lawyers handling it independently. Federal prosecutors don't answer to my father." Serafina studied his face. "You've thought of everything." "I'm trying." "Why?" It was the same question she'd asked before, but this time it meant something different. Ronan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "When I was 12, I watched my mother work herself to exhaustion trying to keep my father happy. She didn't wear a shock bracelet, but she might as well have. Every mistake earned punishment. Every imperfection brought consequences. By the time I was 16, she looked 20 years older than she was." He paused, jaw working. "She died when I was 19, heart attack. The doctor said it was genetic, but I knew better. Stress killed her. Fear killed her. Decades of walking on eggshells and apologizing for existing." Serafina's throat tightened. I swore I'd never ignore that kind of suffering again, Ronan continued. Never pretend I didn't see it. Never let fear control someone while I stood by and did nothing. He met her eyes. So that's why. Because you reminded me of her. And I couldn't watch it happen twice. The confession hung between them like something fragile. I'm sorry, Serafina whispered. Don't be. She would have liked you. They sat together as the rain picked up outside, washing everything clean. Friday morning arrived with low gray clouds and cold wind that made the estate feel smaller somehow, more isolated. Victor Drax's car pulled through the front gates at 8:47 a.m., a black Mercedes with tinted windows and a driver who'd worked for the family for 20 years. Ronan watched from his office window as his father emerged. Victor was 63 but looked 50. Expensive suits, perfect posture, silver hair styled with the same precision he applied to everything else in his life. He moved like someone who'd never been told no and wouldn't recognize the word if he heard it. Marcus appeared in the doorway. He's heading to his office. Wants you there in 10 minutes. Ronan grabbed the tablet with the presentation loaded. How do I look? Like you're about to start a war. Good. He walked through the mansion toward his father's private office on the 3rd floor. A massive room with dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a desk that looked like it belonged in a dictator's palace. Victor was already seated when Ronan entered. He didn't look up from the documents spread across his desk. Close the door, Victor said. Ronan closed it. Sit. He remained standing. Victor's eyes lifted, sharp, calculating. The same eyes Ronan saw in his own reflection. I said sit. I'm fine standing. His father's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his gaze. Suit yourself. Let's start with why you terminated one of the most effective employees this estate has ever had without consulting me first. Because she was running a torture operation disguised as performance management. Victor's eyebrow raised slightly. Torture is a strong word. It's the accurate word. Celeste showed me her data. Productivity increased 40%. Costs dropped significantly. Staff completed tasks ahead of schedule. Staff were shocked for resting, for sleeping, for being human. Ronan set the tablet on the desk and pulled up the first slide. This is the shock log from 1 week. Serafina Vale was punished 247 times in 7 days for infractions like excessive stillness and unauthorized rest periods. Victor glanced at the screen, and her performance improved. The casualness of it hit Ronan like a fist. Her performance improved, he repeated slowly, because she was terrified, because her body forgot how to rest, because she developed insomnia and anxiety disorders and physical trauma. And she completed her work efficiently. Ronan felt something crack inside his chest. Is that really all you care about? I care about results. Celeste delivered results. She delivered abuse. She delivered accountability. Victor leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. These women came here for work. They were given clear expectations. They signed consent forms in English, which most of them don't speak fluently. They had translators, hired by Celeste. Then they should have asked more questions. The logic was airtight, cruel, perfectly constructed to absolve everyone except the victims. Ronan pulled up the next slide. Celeste stole $47,000 from them, labeled it as equipment fees and productivity fines. The money went into shell companies she controlled personally. That's concerning. Concerning? I'll look into the financial discrepancies. She tortured them, Dad. She conditioned their bodies to fear rest. Isabella Moreno miscarried in month 2. The medical report links it directly to stress and sleep deprivation caused by the monitoring system. Victor was quiet for a moment, then, that's unfortunate. Unfortunate. Ronan stared at his father, really looked at him, saw the man who'd built an empire by treating people like assets, numbers on spreadsheets, resources to optimize. You knew, Ronan said quietly. I knew Celeste was implementing new efficiency protocols. You knew what they were. Victor's expression hardened. I knew she was solving problems I didn't have time to micromanage. She reduced overhead, streamlined operations, made this estate profitable instead of a money pit, by traumatizing vulnerable women, by holding employees accountable to standards that included electric shocks, Consequences. Every workplace has consequences for underperformance. Ronan felt his hands start shaking, not from fear, from rage so pure it felt like poison in his bloodstream. You really don't see anything wrong with this. I see that you dismantled an effective system because you got sentimental about staff management. Sentimental. You let emotion cloud your judgment. That's dangerous in our line of work. Our line of work is illegal, Ronan said, voice rising. We smuggle goods, we bribe officials, we operate outside the law. But we don't torture people in their sleep. We don't steal from women who have nothing. We do whatever is necessary to maintain power. Victor stood, placing both hands on his desk. That's what you've never understood. Power requires sacrifice. It requires hard choices. It requires looking at human suffering and deciding whether it serves our interests. And this served our interests? Saving $200,000 annually? Yes, it did. The confirmation settled over the room like ash. Ronan set the tablet down carefully. Then we're done here. We're not done. I'm done. He turned toward the door. If you walk out of this office, there will be consequences. Ronan stopped, looked back over his shoulder. Yeah? I'll remove you from operational oversight, redirect your responsibilities. You'll retain your title, but nothing else. Fine. Victor's eyes narrowed. You're willing to sacrifice your position over housekeeping staff? I'm willing to sacrifice my position over doing the right thing for once in my goddamn life. The right thing doesn't pay bills. It doesn't build empires. It doesn't keep us safe from people who would destroy us given the chance. Maybe I don't want to be safe anymore if this is what safety costs. The words hung in the air between them. Final. Irreversible. Victor sat down slowly. You're making a mistake. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. Ronan walked out and didn't look back. He made it halfway down the hall before his phone started ringing. Marcus. Yeah. Your father just called me. Wants a meeting about transitioning your responsibilities. Let him transition whatever he wants. Ronan, I'm serious, Marcus. I'm done playing this game. He hung up and kept walking. The mansion felt different now. Smaller. Like the walls were closing in. Serafina found him in the garden an hour later, sitting on a stone bench beneath a tree that hadn't bloomed yet. The sky was overcast, threatening rain again. She sat down beside him without asking. For a while they just existed in the silence together. I heard, she said eventually. News travels fast. Marcus told Carmen. Carmen told everyone else. Ronan smiled without humor. Of course she did. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, I did. Serafina looked at him, really looked, saw the exhaustion carved into his face, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands curled into fists even while resting. What happens now? She asked. I don't know. It was the most honest answer he'd given anyone in weeks. They sat together as the first drops of rain started falling, watching the garden slowly disappear behind a curtain of gray. Inside the mansion, Victor Drax made phone calls. Inside the staff quarters, 7 women whispered about futures that suddenly felt uncertain again. And somewhere in the space between power and principle, Ronan Drax realized he'd just crossed a line there was no coming back from. The point of no return had arrived, and he'd walked straight into it with his eyes wide open. The rain turned vicious by evening, hammering the estate like it wanted to break through stone and glass and find everything hiding underneath. Ronan sat in his office with the lights off, watching water stream down the windows in patterns that looked almost deliberate. His phone had been ringing for 3 hours straight, calls from his father's associates, business partners who suddenly needed clarification on operational changes, people who'd never bothered learning his name before but now wanted to confirm rumors about family fractures. He ignored all of them. At 7:32 p.m., someone knocked on his door. Not the aggressive pounding his father favored. Quieter. Uncertain. Come in. Marcus entered carrying a manila folder that looked too thin to contain anything good. His face was carefully neutral in that way that meant the news was worse than bad. You're going to want to see this, Marcus said. Ronan turned on the desk lamp. The sudden light felt invasive. How bad? Worse than we thought. Marcus set the folder down. I finished tracing Celeste's financial records. The shell companies, the stolen wages, all of it. And? The money didn't stay with Celeste. Ronan went very still. What do you mean? Marcus opened the folder, spreading out bank statements and transaction logs across the desk. She was the middleman. The $47,000 deducted from the staff? It moved through 3 different shell companies in 48 hours. Then it landed here. He tapped a highlighted account number. Ronan stared at it. His mouth went dry. That's one of my father's offshore accounts. Victor's personal holdings. Yes. The room tilted slightly. Ronan gripped the edge of his desk. How much? Total? Over the 4-month period? Marcus's voice was flat. Professional. The tone people used when delivering fatal diagnoses. Celeste's program generated $127,000 in deductions across all 7 women. Victor received 82% of it. Celeste kept the rest as her commission. Ronan's vision blurred at the edges. Commission. He was running a profit-sharing scheme, torturing staff for money and splitting the proceeds with your father. The words didn't make sense at first. Ronan's brain rejected them on principle because accepting them meant accepting something too ugly to exist. But the bank statements didn't lie. Transaction after transaction, dates, amounts, account numbers that matched records Ronan had seen 1,000 times while managing family finances. His father hadn't just known about Celeste's program, he'd been her partner. There's more, Marcus said quietly. Jesus Christ, how can there be more? Marcus pulled out another document, an email chain. I pulled these from Celeste's personal server before it got wiped. Correspondence between her and Victor dating back 18 months. Ronan read the first email. From Celeste Whitmore. To Victor Drax. Date November 3rd, 2024. Subject, Workforce Optimization Proposal. Victor. Per our conversation last week, I've developed a comprehensive strategy for reducing labor costs while increasing productivity across estate operations. The system utilizes bioelectric monitoring technology to enforce performance standards in real time. Early testing shows promise for 35 to 40% efficiency gains with minimal visible oversight required. The target demographic would be H-2B visa holders with limited English proficiency and financial vulnerabilities. Risk of external reporting is negligible given immigration concerns and language barriers. Initial investment, $85,000, monitoring equipment, software licensing, legal documentation. Projected annual savings, $200,000 plus ROI. Timeline, 6 to 8 months. I'm prepared to implement a pilot program with 6 to 8 subjects if you'd like to move forward. Let me know your thoughts. C. Victor's response came 2 days later. From Victor Drax to Celeste Whitmore. Date November 5th, 2024. Subject RE. Workforce Optimization Proposal. Celeste, interesting proposal. A few questions. 1. What legal exposure does this create? 2. How do we structure the financial arrangements to protect both parties? 3. What's your personal stake in making this work? If the answers satisfy me, you have authorization to proceed with a small-scale pilot. Keep documentation minimal. Results matter more than process. V. Ronan read through the entire chain, watched his father and Celeste negotiate terms like they were discussing stock portfolios instead of human suffering, watched them refine the system, optimize the cruelty, turn torture into a business model. The final email was dated 3 weeks before Ronan fired Celeste. From Victor Drax. To Celeste Whitmore. Date April 19th, 2026. Subject expansion possibilities. The estate pilot has exceeded expectations. I want to explore scaling this to our other properties. The Miami facility has similar staffing structures. So does the London operation. Could we implement variations of this system across the network? Also, my son has been asking questions about staff management lately. He's getting sentimental in his old age. If he starts poking around, defer to operational confidentiality. I'll handle him directly if necessary. Keep up the excellent work. V. The words, "I'll handle him directly," burned into Ronan's vision. His father had anticipated this confrontation, planned for it, prepared to neutralize his own son if he became a problem. Ronan set the email down very carefully. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't hold the paper steady. When were you planning to tell me? His voice came out strangled. Marcus met his eyes. I just found this 2 hours ago. I came straight to you. 2 hours? Ronan laughed. It sounded broken. I spent 2 hours thinking my father was just callous, just willing to overlook abuse for profit. But he wasn't overlooking it. He was orchestrating it. Ronan, he tortured them for money, Marcus. He turned human suffering into a revenue stream, and then he looked me in the eye and called it efficiency. I know. Do you? Ronan stood abruptly, sending his chair rolling backward into the wall. Because I don't think you do. I don't think anyone does. I just burned every bridge I have defending these women to a man who was stealing from them the entire time. I sacrificed my position in this family for principles he helped violate. Marcus stayed quiet. Let Ronan spiral. And the worst part, the part that makes me want to put my fist through a wall, is that he watched me destroy my own credibility fighting him, and he never once admitted what he'd done. He let me think I was being noble, righteous, standing up for something that mattered. Ronan grabbed the folder and threw it across the room. Papers exploded across the floor like evidence of a detonation. He made me look like a naive idiot who chose staff over family. You chose what was right. There is no right. The words erupted out of him with enough force that Marcus actually stepped back. There's just power and the people who get crushed by it. And I'm standing here pretending I'm different when I've spent a decade building the same goddamn empire that made this possible. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Marcus's expression didn't change. What do you want to do? Ronan pressed both palms against his desk, breathing hard. I want to burn this entire operation to the ground. That's a feeling, not a plan. Then help me make it a plan. Marcus considered him for a long moment. If we expose Victor's involvement, we expose the entire family business, every illegal operation, every bribed official, every shipment. The feds will tear apart everything. Good. You'll go to prison. I probably deserve it. So will a lot of people who work for you. Drivers, logistics coordinators, people who took jobs because they needed money, not because they wanted to be criminals. That stopped Ronan cold. He hadn't thought about them. The dozens of people employed across the network who weren't monsters, just desperate or unlucky, or born into circumstances that made working for the Drax family the best bad option available. What are you saying? Ronan asked. I'm saying there's a difference between justice and revenge, and you need to figure out which one you actually want. Before Ronan could respond, his phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Tonight. Come alone. You know where. The message included GPS coordinates. Ronan showed Marcus the screen. You recognize these? Marcus pulled up a map on his tablet. That's the old industrial complex on the east side, near the docks, abandoned for years. Who do we know that operates out of there? Marcus's face went carefully blank. No one legitimate. Then who? People your father uses when problems need to disappear permanently. Ronan's blood went cold. You think this is a setup? I think someone wants you in a location where witnesses are unlikely. Could be Celeste. Could be your father. They stared at each other. I'm going, Ronan said. That's a terrible idea. Probably, but I'm going anyway. Marcus grabbed his arm. If this goes wrong, you make sure those women are protected. Get them lawyers, get them new identities if necessary. Make sure the investigation continues even if I'm not around to push it. Ronan, promise me. Marcus's grip tightened. Then he let go. I promise. Ronan grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Take a weapon, Marcus called after him. Ronan paused. If I take a weapon, I'll use it. And I'm trying very hard not to become the kind of person who solves problems that way. Your father is. I know. That's why I'm not taking one. He left before Marcus could argue. The drive to the industrial complex took 40 minutes through rain that turned the roads into rivers. Ronan's windshield wipers worked overtime, barely keeping up with the downpour. The GPS coordinates led him to a warehouse that looked like it had been decomposing for decades. Broken windows, rusted metal siding, graffiti covering every surface that wasn't actively collapsing. One car was parked outside, a gray sedan with tinted windows. Not Celeste style. Not his father's either. Ronan killed the engine and sat in the dark, watching rain hammer his windshield. Every instinct he'd developed over 20 years of surviving his family's world screamed at him to leave. Drive away. Call the police. But he'd already crossed the line where turning back was possible. He got out of the car. The warehouse door was partially open, revealing darkness beyond. No lights. No sounds except rain and distant traffic. Ronan pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped inside. The interior smelled like mold and rust and something chemical he couldn't identify. His light swept across empty space, concrete floors, exposed beams, puddles of stagnant water. "Hello?" his voice echoed. Footsteps sounded from deeper in the building. Slow. Deliberate. A figure emerged from the shadows. Celeste Whitmore stood 15 feet away, wearing jeans and a dark jacket instead of her usual professional attire. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked smaller without the armor of expensive clothes and perfect makeup. She also looked terrified. "Thank you for coming," she said. Ronan kept his distance. "What do you want?" "To warn you." "Warn me about what?" Celeste glanced toward the warehouse entrance like she expected someone to appear. "Your father. He's planning something bad." "I already know he's a monster. Tell me something new." "He's going to kill me." The words came out flat. "Matter of fact." Ronan's jaw tightened. "You're lying." "I wish I was." She pulled out her phone, hands shaking, and held it up. "He sent me this an hour ago." Ronan took the phone and read the message. "Your services are no longer required. Tie up loose ends by Sunday, or I'll tie them up myself." The message was from Victor's personal number. Ronan recognized it. "Loose ends," Celeste said. "That's me. I know too much. I can connect him to the program, to the money, to everything." Ronan handed the phone back. "So you're coming to me for protection." "I'm coming to you because we're both dead if we don't work together." "We are not on the same side." "We are now." Celeste's voice cracked. "Victor used both of us. He let you think you were saving those women while he profited from their torture. He let me think I was building a career while he set me up to take the fall. We're both expendable to him." Ronan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she deserved whatever happened. But standing in that abandoned warehouse with rain pounding the roof, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was telling the truth. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Help me disappear. Give me money. Enough to start over somewhere your father can't find me." "In exchange for what?" "Everything, every document, every email, every piece of evidence connecting Victor to the program. I'll testify. I'll cooperate with federal investigators. I'll burn him down with you." Ronan studied her face, saw genuine fear, genuine desperation, also saw calculation. "How do I know this isn't a setup?" he asked. "Because if Victor wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. He doesn't need to lure you anywhere. He owns half the police force and every judge in 3 counties. Valid point. "And if I say no," Ronan asked, "then we both die, separately, and those women never get justice because all the evidence disappears with us." She wasn't wrong. Ronan hated that she wasn't wrong. He pulled out his phone to call Marcus. Get back up, get advice. Get anything that would make this decision feel less insane. No signal. Of course there was no signal. "I need time to think," Ronan said. "We don't have time. Victor moves fast when he decides someone's a liability. I give us 48 hours before..." The warehouse door exploded inward, not opened. Exploded. 3 men in dark clothes rushed in, moving with military precision. Professional. Armed. Ronan grabbed Celeste's arm and pulled her behind a concrete pillar as gunfire erupted. Bullets punched through metal, ricocheted off concrete, sent sparks flying in the darkness. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Ronan's mind raced. No weapon. No backup. No exit except through the men shooting at them. "There's a back door," Celeste gasped. "East wall, loading dock." They ran. More gunfire. Something hot grazed Ronan's shoulder. Not a direct hit, but close enough that he felt the burn through his jacket. They hit the loading dock door together. It was rusted shut. Ronan slammed his shoulder into it. Once. Twice. On the third impact, it gave way and they tumbled out into the rain. A car was waiting. Not the gray sedan, a black SUV with the engine running. The driver's window rolled down. Marcus sat behind the wheel, face grim. "Get in, now." Ronan didn't question it. He shoved Celeste into the back seat and dove in after her as Marcus punched the accelerator. The SUV fishtailed on wet pavement, then found traction and rocketed away from the warehouse. Ronan twisted around to look through the rear window. The three men emerged from the warehouse but didn't pursue. Just watched them leave. "How did you know?" Ronan demanded. Marcus didn't take his eyes off the road. "I didn't. I followed you because I knew this was a trap." "It wasn't a trap. Those men work for your father. I recognize two of them. They're his cleanup crew." Celeste was hyperventilating in the back seat. "He tried to kill us. He actually tried to kill us." Ronan's shoulder burned. He pressed his hand against it and his palm came away bloody. "How bad?" Marcus asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Graze. I'll live." "Good. Because we have bigger problems." "Bigger than my father sending a hit squad?" Marcus took a sharp turn, throwing them sideways. "I just got a text from one of my contacts in the federal prosecutor's office. They're issuing warrants tomorrow morning." Ronan's stomach dropped. "For who?" "Everyone. You, Victor, Celeste, every executive in the organization. They're moving on the whole network." "How is that possible? We haven't even submitted evidence yet." Someone else did." Marcus's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Someone gave them everything. Bank records, communication logs, testimony from witnesses." Celeste leaned forward. "Who?" "I don't know, but whoever it was just declared war on the entire Drax family." Ronan's mind spun through possibilities. Who had access to that level of information? Who wanted both him and his father destroyed? Then it hit him. "Serafina." Marcus glanced at him. "What?" "She had access to my office. To the files Marcus compiled. She saw everything." Ronan's voice was hollow. "She must have copied it, sent it to the feds." "Why would she do that?" "Because she doesn't trust us. Any of us. We're all part of the system that hurt her." Ronan laughed bitterly. "And she's right. We are." The SUV raced through empty streets while rain battered the roof like judgment. Celeste spoke from the back seat, her voice small. "What do we do now?" Ronan looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the road. Neither of them had an answer, because the truth was simple and terrible. They were out of options. Victor wanted them dead. The feds wanted them in prison. And the woman Ronan had tried to save had just destroyed his last chance at controlling the narrative. "We run," Marcus said finally. "Run where?" "Anywhere. Pick a direction and drive until we figure out the next move." Ronan pressed his hand harder against his bleeding shoulder. "I'm tired of running." "Then what?" The question hung in the rain-soaked air. Ronan thought about his mother, about Serafina scrubbing floors at 2 a.m. with a shock bracelet burning her skin, about 7 women who'd survived something no one should have to survive, about the empire his father had built on the backs of people too powerless to fight back. And he made a decision. "Take me to the estate," he said. Marcus's eyes widened. "That's suicide." "Probably." "Your father will kill you." "Maybe, but not before I make him answer for what he's done." "Ronan, I'm done running, Marcus. I'm done protecting him. I'm done pretending any of this is salvageable." Ronan met his eyes in the mirror. "Take me to the estate or let me out here. Those are your options." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned the SUV around. They drove back through the rain toward the Valamon estate, toward Victor Drax, toward a confrontation that could only end one way. In the back seat, Celeste whispered, "We're all going to die." Ronan didn't disagree, but dying while finally telling the truth felt better than living with lies that had already cost too much. The gates of the estate appeared through the rain like the entrance to something that had stopped being home a long time ago. Marcus slowed the SUV. "Last chance to change your mind." Ronan opened the door before the vehicle fully stopped. Rain immediately soaked him, cold and cleansing. "Stay here," he told Marcus. "If I'm not back in an hour, drive away and don't look back." "And her?" Marcus gestured to Celeste. Ronan looked at the woman who'd built the torture system, who'd stolen from vulnerable people, who'd profited from suffering, who was also terrified and broken and maybe, finally, capable of truth. "Take her somewhere safe. Get her statement recorded. Make sure it reaches the right people, even if I don't." Marcus nodded. Ronan walked toward the mansion, water streaming down his face, blood seeping through his jacket, every step carrying him closer to a reckoning years in the making. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. His father was waiting. Ronan stepped inside, dripping water onto marble floors, and called out into the darkness, "Dad, we need to talk!" The lights came on. Victor stood at the top of the grand staircase, perfectly composed in a charcoal suit, holding a glass of scotch like this was a social visit instead of the end of everything. "Hello, son," he said. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." And Ronan realized with cold, terrible clarity that his father had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a trap he'd walked into willingly. And there was no way out except through the man who'd created him, destroyed him, and was about to finish what he'd started. Water dripped from Ronan's jacket onto the marble floor, each drop echoing through the entrance hall like a countdown. Blood from his shoulder wound mixed with rain, leaving pink trails down his arm. He didn't bother wiping it away. Victor descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. His scotch didn't slosh. His hand didn't shake. He looked like a man who'd anticipated this moment and prepared for it with the same cold precision he applied to everything else. "You're bleeding," Victor observed. "Your men have terrible aim. If they'd wanted you dead, you'd be dead." Victor reached the bottom of the stairs and took a sip of his drink. "The shooting was meant to scare you, drive you here, which it did." Ronan's jaw clenched. "You wanted me to find out. I wanted you to understand the cost of your choices." Victor walked past him toward his study. "Come, we should talk somewhere more comfortable than a hallway." "I'm fine here." Victor stopped, turned. That wasn't a request. The temperature in the room dropped. Ronan followed. The study was exactly as he remembered. Dark wood, leather furniture, shelves filled with books Victor had never read, but kept because they looked impressive. A fire crackled in the fireplace despite it being May. His father liked fire. Said it reminded him that everything could burn if you weren't careful. Victor settled into his chair behind the massive desk, gestured to the seat across from him. Ronan remained standing. "Suit yourself." Victor set down his scotch. "I assume Marcus showed you the financial records?" "Yeah." "And the emails with Celeste?" "Those too." "Then you know I've been funding her program from the beginning." "Profiting from it, you mean?" Victor's expression didn't change. "Semantics. The point is, you discovered information you weren't meant to discover. Now we need to discuss what happens next." Ronan's fists clenched at his sides. "What happens next is you go to prison." "No. What happens next is you decide whether you want to be part of this family or not. I already made that choice." "Did you?" Victor leaned forward slightly. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're still here. Still standing in my study, still breathing air on property I own. If you'd truly chosen to leave, you'd be running. But you came back. Which tells me you're conflicted. I came back to make sure you face consequences." "Consequences." Victor smiled without warmth. "You sound like your mother. She used to talk about consequences too. Moral accountability, the weight of our sins, it was exhausting." The casual mention of his mother hit Ronan like a fist. "Don't." "Don't what? Speak the truth?" "Your mother was a good woman, kind, gentle, completely unsuited for this world. She thought love and principles could change me." Victor picked up his scotch again. "They couldn't, and they won't change you either. I'm nothing like you. You're exactly like me. You just haven't accepted it yet." Ronan took a step forward. "I didn't torture people for money. No. You just looked the other way while I did it for 20 years. Victor's voice was razor sharp now. "You ran smuggling operations, bribed officials, laundered money through shell corporations. You built half this empire with your own hands. So don't stand there pretending you're innocent just because you drew an arbitrary line at shock bracelets." The words cut deep because they were true. Ronan had spent 2 decades convincing himself there was a difference between the violence he committed and the violence his father orchestrated. Clean crimes versus dirty ones, necessary evils versus unnecessary cruelty. But standing in that study with blood soaking through his jacket, he couldn't remember what the difference was anymore. "I'm turning over evidence to federal investigators," Ronan said. "Everything, your accounts, your operations, every crime you've ever committed." Victor's smile widened. "No, you're not. Watch me. I already did. That's why I had Marcus follow tonight. That's why I know Celeste is currently sitting in his SUV outside the gates. That's why I know you gave him instructions to protect those 7 women if something happened to you. Ronan's blood went cold. You're bluffing. Victor pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and turned it around. The image showed Marcus's SUV from an elevated angle. Infrared. Thermal imaging. Clear enough to see 3 heat signatures inside. Marcus in the driver's seat, Celeste in the back, and someone else Ronan didn't recognize in the passenger seat. I have eyes everywhere, Victor said quietly. Cameras. Informants. People who owe me favors. Did you really think you could move against me without me knowing? Ronan's mind raced. If his father knew where Marcus was, knew what Ronan was planning, then everything was already over. Here's what's going to happen, Victor continued. You're going to call Marcus. Tell him to bring Celeste inside. We'll have a civilized conversation about moving forward. Then you'll return to your position in this family, and we'll never speak of this again. And if I refuse? Victor's expression went flat, empty. Then I make a phone call and Marcus dies, Celeste dies. And those 7 women you're so desperate to save, they disappear, deported, detained, declared illegal and erased from the system. I have ICE agents on my payroll who'd process the paperwork before sunrise. Ronan felt his world narrow to a single point of terrible clarity. His father wasn't bluffing. He never bluffed. You'd kill your own son's friend to maintain control, Ronan said. I'd kill anyone who threatened this family's survival. That's what you've never understood. This empire isn't built on money or connections. It's built on the willingness to do what others won't. Victor stood slowly. So make your choice. Family or principles, power or poverty, survival or suicide. The study felt smaller suddenly, airless. Ronan looked at his father, really looked at him, and saw a man who'd murdered his own humanity so long ago he'd forgotten it ever existed. No, Ronan said. Victor's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not calling Marcus. I'm not bringing Celeste in. And I'm not protecting you anymore. Then you're sentencing them to death. Maybe. But I'm also ending this, tonight. Victor's hand moved toward the desk drawer. Ronan knew what was inside. His father kept a Glock 19 in the top right drawer. Loaded, safety off. Ronan lunged. He hit the desk with his full weight, sending it sliding backward into Victor's chest. The Scotch glass flew, shattered against the wall. Victor stumbled but recovered fast, muscle memory from decades of violence kicking in. His fist caught Ronan in the ribs, hard, professional, the kind of punch that cracked bone. Ronan gasped, pain exploding through his chest, but he kept moving, grabbed his father's wrist as Victor reached for the drawer. They grappled, knocking over a lamp, sending books cascading off shelves. Victor was older, but he was stronger, trained. He twisted Ronan's arm behind his back, driving him face first into the desk. I didn't want this, Victor hissed in his ear. But you forced my hand. Ronan slammed his head backward, connecting with his father's nose. Heard cartilage crunch. Victor's grip loosened just enough. Ronan spun, drove his elbow into his father's throat and shoved him away. Victor crashed into the bookshelf, blood streaming from his nose. He smiled through it, actually smiled. There you are, he said. There's the son I raised. Then he pulled a knife from his belt. Not a small knife. A tactical blade, 7 inches. Serrated edge. Ronan's pulse hammered in his ears. Dad, you want to destroy me? You'll have to kill me first. Victor moved. Fast. Trained. The blade came in low, aiming for Ronan's gut. Ronan twisted sideways, felt the knife slice through his jacket, graze his ribs. Shallow. Not fatal, but close. Too close. He grabbed the fireplace poker, swung it hard. Victor blocked with his forearm, metal on flesh, and didn't even flinch. They circled each other, breathing hard, blood dripping from multiple wounds. You can't win this, Victor said. I've been fighting longer than you've been alive. Then I'll die trying. Victor lunged again. Ronan sidestepped, swung the poker at his father's knee. Connected. Victor grunted, stumbled, but didn't go down. The blade came up, caught Ronan across the forearm. Deeper this time. Blood welled hot and fast. Ronan dropped the poker, grabbed his father's knife hand with both of his, and drove him backward into the wall. Pictures fell. Glass broke. They grappled for control of the blade, faces inches apart. "You're going to bleed out," Victor gasped. "So are you." And it was true. Blood from Victor's nose covered his face, dripped onto his expensive suit. The hit to his knee had him favoring his left leg. But he was still fighting, still trying to kill his own son. The knife turned slowly between them, both men straining for control. Ronan felt his grip weakening. Blood loss, exhaustion, injuries compounding. He was losing. Then the study door exploded open. Marcus stood in the doorway, gun drawn, face carved from stone. "Let him go, Victor." Victor's eyes flicked to Marcus. "This is family business. Let him go or I put a bullet in your head. You don't have the spine." Marcus fired. The shot went wide deliberately, punching through the wall 6 inches from Victor's skull. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. "Next one doesn't miss," Marcus said. Victor's grip on the knife loosened, just slightly. Ronan shoved him away, stumbled backward, nearly fell. His vision blurred at the edges. How much blood had he lost? Too much. Victor straightened slowly, still holding the knife. "You just signed your death warrant, Marcus. Get in line." Footsteps pounded in the hallway. More people coming. Victor's security team, probably. Men loyal to him who'd shoot Ronan and Marcus without hesitation if ordered. Marcus grabbed Ronan's arm. "We need to go, now." "Serafina, the others." "Already gone. I got them out an hour ago. Safe house across state lines." Relief flooded through Ronan so intense he nearly collapsed. "You saw this coming. Now move before your father's men trap us here." They backed toward the door. Victor watched them with cold calculation. "This isn't over," Victor said. "Yeah," Ronan replied. "It is." They ran. Down the hallway, through the mansion Ronan had grown up in, past rooms filled with memories of a childhood that felt like it belonged to someone else. Behind them, Victor's men flooded into the study. Shouts, orders, the sound of weapons being loaded. Marcus led them through the kitchen, out the service entrance, into the rain-soaked night. The SUV was running, Celeste still in the back seat, looking terrified. They threw themselves inside. Marcus floored the accelerator before Ronan's door fully closed. Gunfire erupted behind them. Bullets punched through the rear window, safety glass spiderwebbing but not shattering. Marcus swerved, fishtailed, then rocketed down the estate driveway toward the gates. The gates were closing. "Hold on," Marcus said. He didn't slow down. They hit the gates at 60 miles per hour. Metal screamed, twisted, gave way. The SUV burst through onto the main road, trailing sparks and broken metal. Ronan twisted in his seat to look back. The Valamon estate disappeared into the rain and darkness behind them like something from a nightmare he was finally waking up from. "Where are we going?" he asked. Marcus's hands were white on the steering wheel. "Somewhere your father can't reach. I have a place, off the grid. No one knows about it. The women, I told you, safe house, federal protection. I handed over everything to the prosecutors before I came for you. Testimony, evidence, financial records. They have enough to bury Victor 10 times over." Ronan's head spun. "When did you—" "While you were busy having a moral crisis, I was busy making sure it mattered." Marcus glanced at him. "You're bleeding everywhere, by the way. Press harder on that arm before you pass out." Ronan looked down. His forearm was soaked with blood, dripping onto the seat. The wound from Victor's knife was deeper than he'd realized. He pressed his other hand against it, hissing through his teeth. In the back seat, Celeste spoke for the first time since they'd fled. "Are we going to die?" "Probably not," Marcus said. "But the night's not over yet." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and passed it to Ronan. "It's for you." Ronan looked at the screen. A text from an unknown number. "Ronan. It's Serafina. Marcus gave me this number. I need you to know something." His heart stopped. "I'm the one who sent the evidence to federal investigators. I copied everything from your office 3 days ago. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I couldn't trust anyone. Not after everything that happened, but I wanted you to know it was me. And I wanted to say thank you. For cutting off the bracelet. For seeing us when no one else did. For trying to make it right even when it cost you everything. The prosecutors told us Victor is being arrested tomorrow morning. All of us are testifying. We're going to make sure he never hurts anyone again. I hope you're safe. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. Ronan read the message 3 times. Then he started laughing. Not happy laughter, the kind that came from exhaustion and blood loss, and the surreal realization that he'd spent the past week trying to protect people who'd already saved themselves. "You okay?" Marcus asked. "No, but I will be." They drove through the rain for another hour, taking random turns, doubling back, making sure they weren't followed. Eventually, Marcus pulled onto a dirt road that led deep into forest. The headlights carved tunnels through darkness and rain. The safe house was a cabin, small, isolated. The kind of place that didn't officially exist. Marcus killed the engine. "We stay here tonight. Tomorrow we figure out next steps." They stumbled inside, dripping water and blood. Marcus found a first aid kit, started patching Ronan's wounds with the efficiency of someone who'd done field medicine before. "You need a hospital," Marcus said. "Hospitals ask questions." "You're going to pass out from blood loss." "Then I'll pass out, but I'm not going to a hospital where my father can find me." Marcus didn't argue, just worked in silence, cleaning wounds, applying pressure, wrapping everything in gauze and medical tape. Celeste sat in the corner hugging herself. "What happens to me now?" Ronan looked at her. This woman who'd tortured 7 people, who'd profited from suffering, who'd been terrified enough to betray his father and brave enough to testify against him. "You testify," Ronan said. "You tell prosecutors everything. You help put my father away. And then you disappear. New name, new life, somewhere far away from here." "And you?" "I testify too. Answer for my own crimes. Take whatever punishment I deserve." Marcus's hands stilled. "You don't have to do that." "Yeah, I do. You helped save those women after spending 20 years helping build the empire that hurt them." Ronan met his eyes. "I don't get credit for doing the right thing once when I've done the wrong thing 1,000 times." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he went back to bandaging. By the time he finished, dawn was breaking outside. Gray light filtered through dirty windows, washing everything in silver. Ronan stood carefully, testing his balance. Everything hurt. His shoulder, his ribs, his arm, his head. He walked to the window and looked out at the forest. Somewhere out there, federal agents were preparing arrest warrants. Somewhere, 7 women were preparing to testify. Somewhere, his father was realizing his empire was collapsing. And somewhere inside Ronan's chest, beneath the pain and exhaustion and blood loss, something that felt almost like peace began to take root. He'd lost everything, his position, his family, his future. But for the first time in 20 years, he could look at himself in a reflection and not see his father staring back. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked. Ronan didn't turn around. "That my mother would be proud." "Of what?" "Of me finally choosing the hard thing instead of the easy thing." Marcus joined him at the window. "The hard thing almost got you killed. The easy thing was killing me anyway. Just slower." They stood together, watching dawn break over a world that looked different than it had 12 hours ago. Behind them, Celeste's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and went pale. "What?" Ronan asked. She turned the phone around. A news alert. "Breaking. Federal raids target. Drax family estate. Multiple arrests expected." Ronan read the headline twice. It was over. Not finished, not resolved, but over in the way that mattered. His father's empire was burning, and for the first time in his life, Ronan Drax was standing outside the flames instead of trying to put them out. "What now?" Marcus asked. Ronan thought about it. About the prosecutors who'd want his testimony. About the prison time he'd probably serve. About the long road ahead filled with consequences and accountability and trying to build something better from the ashes. "Now," he said, "we tell the truth. All of it. And we let the pieces fall where they fall." Marcus nodded slowly. Outside, rain began to fall again. Softer this time, gentler, like the world was washing itself clean. And somewhere across state lines in a safe house Ronan would never see, Seraphina Vale woke up without fear for the first time in months. Her wrist was bare, unbandaged. The scars still visible, but healing. She made coffee in a kitchen that belonged to no one she was afraid of. She called her son and heard him laugh, really laugh, for the first time in weeks. She sat down at a table surrounded by 6 other women who'd survived the same nightmare, and together they prepared to face the men who'd hurt them, not as victims anymore, as witnesses, as warriors, as proof that some things, some people, could not be broken no matter how hard the world tried. And when the federal prosecutors arrived that morning to take their statements, Serafina looked them in the eye and said 5 words that changed everything. "I'm ready to tell my story." The battle wasn't over, but for the first time it felt like something they could win. The federal courthouse in downtown Baltimore looked like something designed to intimidate. All gray stone and bronze doors and windows that reflected nothing back except your own small shape against massive architecture. Serafina stood on the steps at 8:47 in the morning, staring up at it while her hands shook inside the pockets of the navy blazer the victim's advocate had bought her 3 days ago. Behind her, the other 6 women waited. Anna, Carmen, Lucia, Isabella, Sophia, Valentina. All of them dressed in clothes that didn't quite fit, wearing expressions that said they'd survived worse than testifying but barely believed it themselves. The lead prosecutor, a woman named Catherine Chen, who looked 40 but moved like someone 20 years older, approached them with a gentle smile that didn't reach her eyes. She'd seen too many cases like this, knew exactly how it would unfold. "Ready?" Catherine asked. Serafina nodded because her voice had stopped working somewhere between the hotel and the courthouse steps. "Remember what we discussed. Answer the questions directly. Don't elaborate unless asked. If you need a break, just say so. Judge Morrison is fair. He'll give you time." They walked inside together. The metal detectors beeped. Security guards waved them through with expressions that suggested they'd already heard what this case was about and didn't want to make it harder. The hallways were marble. Cold. Every footstep echoed. Courtroom 4B was smaller than Serafina expected. Wooden benches, high ceiling, an American flag in the corner that looked like it had been there since the building opened. The judge's bench sat elevated, empty for now. The prosecution table was organized, neat. The defense table, oh. Victor Drax sat at the defense table in a suit that probably cost more than Serafina had earned in 6 months. His hair was perfectly styled. His face was calm. He looked like a man attending a business meeting, not a criminal trial that could send him to prison for the rest of his life. Next to him sat 3 lawyers who radiated the kind of expensive competence that made justice feel like something only rich people could afford. Victor's eyes found Serafina. He smiled. Not cruel, not mocking, just a small, polite acknowledgement that said he recognized her and wasn't particularly concerned. Serafina's stomach turned to ice. Catherine Chen guided them to seats behind the prosecution table. "He's trying to intimidate you. Don't let him." "He's good at it," Anna whispered. "So are you. You survived him. That's harder." The bailiff entered. "All rise." Judge Morrison was 60-something with silver hair and reading glasses that made him look like someone's grandfather. He settled into his seat, surveyed the courtroom, and began without preamble. "We're here for the arraignment and preliminary hearing in the matter of United States versus Victor Drax, Celeste Whitmore, and associated corporate entities. Are both parties ready to proceed?" Catherine stood. "The prosecution is ready, Your Honor." The lead defense attorney, a man named Richard Carver, who'd defended 3 senators and a Fortune 500 CEO, stood with practiced ease. "The defense is ready." "Then let's begin." The next 4 hours were a blur of legal procedure that felt designed to drain meaning from horror. Catherine presented evidence methodically. Bank statements, email chains, medical reports documenting burns, sleep deprivation, psychological trauma, expert testimony from a psychologist who explained how prolonged stress conditioning could fracture someone's sense of safety permanently. Victor's lawyers objected to everything: chain of custody issues, hearsay, relevance, prejudicial impact. Judge Morrison overruled most of it, but sustained enough that Serafina could see the strategy forming: death by 1,000 cuts. Make every piece of evidence feel questionable. Make the jury doubt whether this was really as bad as prosecutors claimed. At 1:15 p.m., Catherine called Serafina to the stand. The walk from her seat to the witness box felt like crossing an ocean. Every eye in the courtroom followed her. Reporters in the gallery, victim advocates, random people who'd come to watch justice happen or fail to happen. The bailiff held out a Bible. Serafina stared at it. The judge noticed her hesitation. You may affirm instead of swear if you prefer, Ms. Vale. I affirm, she said quietly. Please state your full name for the record. Serafina Isabel Vale. Catherine approached with a gentle expression that somehow made it worse. Ms. Vale, can you tell the court how you came to be employed at the Valemont estate? Serafina's throat was dry. Someone had placed a glass of water on the witness stand. She took a sip. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped it. I was recruited through an agency in Tijuana. They promised legal work permits and good wages. I needed money to support my son. How old is your son? 6. Where is he now? With my mother in Guadalajara. Catherine nodded. What happened when you arrived at the estate? And Serafina told them. Not the sanitized version, not the version that made her sound brave or strong or capable, the real version, the one where she was terrified from day one, where Celeste Whitmore smiled while explaining the bracelet would help her be more productive, where the first shock came at 11:47 p.m. on her third night because she'd fallen asleep too deeply. She told them about the burns, the stolen wages, the threats about deportation, the way her body forgot how to rest, how she started hallucinating vibrations that weren't there, how she seriously considered killing herself twice because dying felt easier than enduring another day of punishment for existing. The courtroom was silent except for her voice. Catherine asked questions that guided her through the worst parts, made her describe specific incidents, specific shocks. The night Isabella miscarried, the morning Sophia collapsed from exhaustion, and Celeste docked her pay for performance failure. Serafina looked at the jury while she spoke, saw some of them crying, saw others looking furious, saw one older man in the back row staring at Victor with an expression that suggested he understood exactly what kind of monster sat at the defense table. Then it was Richard Carver's turn. He stood slowly, buttoning his suit jacket with the kind of casual confidence that made it clear he'd done this 1,000 times and won most of them. Miss Vale, he began, I'm very sorry for what you went through. It sounded sincere, that made it worse. But I need to ask you some clarifying questions. Is that all right? Serafina nodded. You signed a consent form when you began employment, correct? Yes. And that form explained the monitoring system? It was in English. I don't read English well. But you had access to a translator? Provided by Celeste. But a translator nonetheless. Catherine stood. Objection. The translator was employed by the defendant. That's hardly impartial. Sustained, Judge Morrison said. Carver didn't miss a beat. Ms. Vale, at any point during your employment, did you attempt to remove the bracelet yourself? I was told it would flag me for deportation. But did you try? No. Did you report the situation to local police? I was afraid some... That's not what I asked. Did you report it, yes or no? No. Did you contact any advocacy organizations? Any workers' rights groups? I didn't know who to trust. But you didn't try. Catherine shot to her feet. Objection! Counsel is badgering the witness. I'm establishing a pattern of choices, Your Honor. Overruled, but tread carefully, Mr. Carver. Carver turned back to Serafina. You testified that you considered ending your own life, but you didn't actually attempt it, did you? The question hit like a fist. Serafina stared at him. No. So despite everything you described, you continued working, continued accepting payment, continued residing at the estate of your own free will. I didn't have a choice. You had choices, Ms. Vale. You could have left. You could have reported it. You could have fought back. But you didn't. Instead, you stayed for 4 months, collected paychecks, and only came forward after someone else intervened. Isn't that correct? Tears burned behind Serafina's eyes. You don't understand. I understand that you're painting my client as a monster when the evidence shows you were a willing participant in a mutually agreed-upon employment arrangement that simply didn't meet your expectations. Catherine was on her feet shouting objections. Judge Morrison was banging his gavel. The courtroom erupted into chaos. But Serafina barely heard any of it. She was staring at Victor Drax. He met her gaze with that same small smile, like he'd already won. Like nothing she said mattered because he had lawyers who could twist truth into lies and make suffering sound like choice. Something inside Serafina cracked. Not broke. cracked. And through the crack, something harder than fear pushed through. "You want to know why I didn't fight back?" Her voice cut through the noise. The courtroom went silent. Judge Morrison stopped mid-bang. "Ms. Vale, because I watched him condition my body to fear rest. I watched him steal money I needed to feed my son. I watched him turn survival into a game where every move I made was wrong." She pointed at Victor. "He didn't just hurt me. He made me hurt myself, made me believe I deserved it. That's not employment, that's torture." Carver opened his mouth. Serafina kept talking. And you can stand there in your expensive suit asking why I didn't report it, why I didn't leave, why I didn't fight harder. But you've never been desperate. You've never been terrified. You've never had to choose between enduring abuse and losing everything you love." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "So yes, I stayed. I endured. I survived. And now I'm here telling the truth. Not because I'm brave, because I'm done being afraid of men who think power gives them the right to destroy people." The silence that followed was absolute. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. "Mr. Carver, any further questions?" Carver looked at the jury, saw their faces, saw that he'd just lost them completely. "No further questions, Your Honor." Serafina stepped down from the witness stand on legs that barely held her. Catherine met her at the gate, squeezed her shoulder without words. The trial continued. 6 more women testified. 6 more stories of systematic abuse disguised as performance management. Medical experts, financial analysts, a former FBI agent who'd investigated labor trafficking for 20 years and called this one of the most sophisticated operations he'd ever seen. Celeste Whitmore testified against Victor in exchange for a reduced sentence. She sat in that same witness box and explained exactly how they'd built the system, how they'd targeted vulnerable women, how they'd split the profits. Victor's lawyers fought every inch, attacked credibility, questioned timelines, suggested the women had coordinated their stories for financial gain. But the evidence was overwhelming. 3 days later, the jury delivered their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Labor trafficking, racketeering, wire fraud, conspiracy. 18 separate charges that would put Victor Drax behind bars for the next 47 years minimum. He didn't react when the verdict was read, just sat there in his expensive suit, looking like a man who'd calculated the odds and accepted the outcome. But when the bailiffs came to take him away in handcuffs, his eyes found Serafina one last time. No smile this time, just cold recognition that she'd beaten him. They let him out through a side door. The courtroom erupted in noise, reporters shouting questions, advocates crying with relief, the 7 women holding each other and shaking. Serafina sat alone at the end of a bench, staring at the empty defense table. It was over. Not healed, not fixed, but over. Catherine found her 20 minutes later in the courthouse bathroom, washing her face with cold water. "You okay?" Catherine asked. "I don't know what okay feels like anymore." "That's normal. It'll take time." Serafina dried her hands on rough paper towels. "What happens now?" "Now Victor goes to prison. Celeste serves 8 years minimum. The civil suit proceeds. You and the others will likely receive significant compensation, and you get to decide what comes next for you." "What if I don't know?" Catherine's expression softened. "Then you figure it out one day at a time. That's all anyone can do." They walked out of the courthouse together into afternoon sunlight that felt too bright after 3 days inside fluorescent-lit rooms. The other women were waiting on the steps. When they saw Serafina, they surrounded her. Not saying much, just existing together in the shared understanding that they'd survived something designed to break them. A black sedan pulled up to the curb. The back door opened. Ronan Drax stepped out. He looked different than Serafina remembered. Thinner. Older somehow. His arm was still bandaged from his fight with Victor. He moved carefully, like someone recovering from injuries that went deeper than flesh. The women tensed immediately. Anna's hand went to Carmen's arm. Isabella took a step backward. But Serafina walked forward. They met on the sidewalk between the courthouse and the street. Neither spoke for a long moment. "I testified too," Ronan said finally. "Yesterday. Against my father, against the family business. All of it. I heard. I'm probably going to prison. Accessory charges, conspiracy. The prosecutors offered a deal if I cooperate, but I'll still serve time. Good. He nodded. Deserved that. I wanted you to know I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner, for being part of the system that hurt you, for everything. Serafina studied his face, saw genuine remorse, saw exhaustion, saw someone who'd burned his entire life down trying to do the right thing too late. You cut off my bracelet, she said. You believed me when no one else did. You lost everything trying to help us. That doesn't erase 20 years of looking the other way. No, it doesn't. Serafina took a breath. But it matters anyway. What you did. It mattered. Something in Ronan's expression cracked. Thank you. They stood together in the afternoon sun, two people who'd survived the same nightmare from different sides and somehow found their way to the same truth. What will you do now? Ronan asked. Go home. See my son. Figure out how to be someone who isn't afraid anymore. That sounds good. What about you? Ronan looked up at the courthouse. Face the consequences. Serve my time. Try to become someone my mother would have been proud of. She would be, Serafina said. What you did at the end, that took courage. So did what you did. Every day for 4 months. They stood in silence for another moment. Then Serafina extended her hand. Ronan took it. Not a handshake exactly. Just two people acknowledging each other's humanity in a world that had tried to erase it. Take care of yourself, Serafina said. You too. She walked back to the other women. They left together, heading toward a future that was still uncertain, but finally, genuinely theirs to choose. Ronan watched them go. Then he got back in the sedan where Marcus waited. How'd it go? Marcus asked. Better than I deserved. They drove away from the courthouse toward the federal building where Ronan's own sentencing hearing would take place in 2 weeks. The city moved past the windows, people going about their lives, traffic and construction and the ordinary chaos of existence. Somewhere in that city, Victor Drax sat in a holding cell waiting for transfer to a maximum security prison. Somewhere else, Celeste Whitmore was beginning to understand what 8 years felt like when measured in regret. And somewhere far away, 7 women were learning how to sleep without fear. 3 months later, Serafina stood in a small house in a quiet neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona. The Victim Compensation Fund had provided relocation assistance, a fresh start far from Maryland and the estate and everything that had happened there. The house was modest, 2 bedrooms, a backyard with a tree that hadn't bloomed yet, kitchen appliances that worked but weren't fancy. It was perfect. Her son Diego ran through the living room chasing a toy truck, laughing in that pure way children laugh when they don't know the world can hurt them. Serafina's mother, Rosa, sat at the kitchen table chopping vegetables for dinner. She'd moved from Guadalajara to help with Diego while Serafina found work. Real work. The kind where you got paid fairly for your labor and went home at the end of the day without checking for invisible prisons wrapped around your wrist. Serafina had a job at a local bakery. Early mornings, decent pay, a boss who said please and thank you and actually meant it. Her wrist had healed. The scars were still visible but fading. Some nights she still woke up expecting shocks that never came. Still felt phantom vibrations that made her heart race before her brain caught up. But it was getting better, slowly, painfully. In fragments, she was getting better. Diego crashed into her legs, wrapping his small arms around her knees. "Mama, come play." She picked him up, all 42 pounds of him, and held him close. He smelled like sunshine and the cheap shampoo she bought at the dollar store. His hair needed cutting. His shirt had a stain from lunch. He was perfect. "In a minute, mijo. Let Mama finish making dinner." "But I want to play now." "I know, but some things are worth waiting for." He squirmed down and ran back to his trucks. Rosa looked up from her vegetables. "You're smiling." Serafina touched her face. She was. "I didn't realize. You haven't smiled like that in a long time." "I haven't had much to smile about." Rosa set down her knife. "You have everything to smile about. You survived. You fought back. You're here." Serafina sat down across from her mother. "Some days I don't feel like I survived. I feel like I'm still there, still trapped. That's the trauma talking. It'll fade." "Will it?" Rosa reached across the table, took her daughter's hand. "Your scars will always be there, but they don't own you anymore. That man, Victor, He's in prison. He can't hurt you. And you're here, building a new life, raising your son. That's victory. Serafina's throat tightened. It doesn't feel like victory. Because victory isn't what you thought it would be. You thought it would erase what happened, but it doesn't. It just means you're strong enough to carry it without breaking. They sat together in the quiet kitchen while Diego played in the living room and the Arizona sun poured through windows that belonged to Serafina now. Hers. Safe. That night, after Diego was asleep and Rosa had gone to bed, Serafina sat alone on the back porch with a cup of tea she'd made herself. No one rushed her. No one timed her. No one punished her for sitting still. She pulled out her phone and opened the group chat the 7 women had created. They messaged each other daily, sometimes more, checking in, sharing small victories, reminding each other they weren't alone. Anna. Just finished my first week at the new job. They gave me an Employee of the Week certificate. I cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes. Carmen. Good crying or bad crying? Anna. Both, mostly good. Lucia. I slept 8 hours last night. Straight through. No nightmares. First time in 6 months. Isabella. That's huge. Proud of you. Sophia. My daughters visited this weekend. First time seeing them since everything happened. We laughed. Actually laughed. I forgot what that felt like. Valentina. I've been cancer-free for 2 months. Doctors say the stress reduction helped. Apparently not being tortured is good for your health. Who knew? Serafina smiled through tears and typed, Diego asked me today why I was always touching my wrist. I told him I was checking to make sure I was still free. He asked what I was free from. I said bad people. He said, good thing Mama is stronger than bad people. And I almost believed him. The responses came fast. Carmen, you are stronger. Anna, we all are. Lucia, we survived. That's the definition of strength. Serafina set down her phone and looked up at the stars. They were brighter here than in Maryland, clearer, less obscured by city lights and mansions with marble floors and invisible prisons. She thought about Ronan Drax, who'd sent her a letter 2 weeks ago from the federal prison where he was serving 7 years for conspiracy and racketeering. The letter was short, apologetic. He'd enclosed a check for $50,000 from his personal accounts, money that hadn't been seized in the criminal case. Blood money, technically. But he'd written that if she could find a way to use it for something good, maybe it would mean something. She'd deposited it, used half to pay off her mother's medical debt, put the other half in a college fund for Diego, turned blood money into hope. The night air was cool, quiet, peaceful in a way Serafina was still learning to trust. She sat there for a long time, just breathing. In, out, in, out. No buzzing, no shocks, no punishment. Just silence and stars and the impossible realization that she was allowed to rest now. That rest wasn't something she had to earn anymore. It was something she had fought for, bled for, survived for. And finally, it was hers. Somewhere across the country, in a federal prison, Ronan Drax lay on a narrow bunk staring at a ceiling that would be his view for the next 7 years. His cellmate, a guy named Tommy, who'd been caught running a Ponzi scheme, snored in the bunk above. The prison was loud even at night, voices echoing off concrete, doors clanging, guards walking their rounds. Ronan didn't sleep much anymore, partly because prison beds were terrible, mostly because when he closed his eyes, he saw his mother's face, saw Serafina scrubbing floors, saw the 7 women whose suffering he'd ignored for years. But he also saw Serafina's expression when she'd shaken his hand outside the courthouse. Forgiveness wasn't the right word. Acknowledgement, maybe. Recognition that he'd tried to be better even if it came too late. It was more than he deserved. His lawyer had told him he'd be eligible for early release in 5 years if he maintained good behavior and continued cooperating with federal investigations into his father's network. 5 years felt both impossibly long and not nearly long enough for what he'd been complicit in. But he'd do the time. All of it. Because that's what accountability looked like, when you'd spent 20 years running from it. A guard walked past his cell, shining a flashlight through the bars. Routine check. Ronan didn't move, just stared at the ceiling and thought about the future. When he got out, he'd be 44. Too old to rebuild the empire, too marked by his crimes to operate in his father's world, even if he wanted to. Which he didn't. He'd spent his time in prison getting degrees, business administration, maybe social work, something that could be useful when he got out. Marcus had written to him last week, said the safe house network they'd used to protect the women was being formalized into a nonprofit. Resources for victims of labor trafficking, legal aid, housing assistance, mental health support. They wanted Ronan involved when he was released. If he was interested. He was. It wouldn't erase what he'd done, wouldn't balance the scales or make him a good person. But it was a start, and starts were all anyone got in the end. Victor Drax sat in a different prison, maximum security Colorado, staring at walls that would contain him until he died. No parole, no early release, no escape clauses. 47 years minimum. At 63, that was a life sentence dressed up in numbers that suggested possibility. There was no possibility. He'd lost everything. The estate seized by the government, his accounts frozen and redistributed to his victims, his network dismantled by federal prosecutors who'd spent 3 months unraveling every thread of his criminal empire. Some days Victor felt rage about it. Other days he felt nothing. Today he felt curious. His son had turned against him. A woman he'd brutalized had destroyed him in court. 7 victims had survived when they should have stayed broken. It was almost impressive. Victor had built his empire on the principle that power was absolute, that fear was control, that people would always choose survival over resistance. He'd been wrong, not about most people. Most people still broke exactly the way he expected. But some didn't. And those few, the ones who found strength in places he couldn't reach, they were the ones who'd ended him. He respected that, even as he hated it. A guard walked by. Drax, rec time. Victor stood slowly. His knees still ached from where Ronan had hit him with the fireplace poker. Probably would for the rest of his life. He walked to the recreation yard where 100 other men who thought they were untouchable now lifted weights and played cards and pretended this wasn't there forever. And Victor Drax, who'd controlled an empire spanning 3 continents, stood alone against a concrete wall and watched clouds move across a sky he'd never touch again. 6 months after the trial, Serafina received a letter. It was from Ronan. Not the first one he'd sent, but different somehow. She opened it standing in her kitchen while Diego colored at the table and her mother hummed in the garden outside. Dear Serafina, I know I've already apologized. I know words don't fix what happened, but I wanted to tell you something I've been thinking about a lot. You didn't just survive, you transformed. You took the worst thing that could happen to a person and refused to let it define you. You fought back, you testified, you rebuilt. That's not survival, that's triumph. I'm trying to do the same thing. It's harder than I expected. Some days I don't think I deserve a second chance. Other days I think maybe the point isn't deserving it. Maybe the point is trying anyway. I'm working on getting my degree, business administration and nonprofit management. When I get out, I want to help build systems that protect people instead of destroying them. I know it won't erase what I did, but maybe it'll mean something anyway. Thank you for letting me see what real courage looks like. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for showing the world that power doesn't always win. I hope you're happy. You deserve it more than anyone I've ever met. Ronan Serafina read it twice. Then she sat down at the table, pulled out a piece of paper and wrote back. Ronan, I'm not sure I know what happiness is yet, but I'm learning. My son is healthy. My mother is here. I have a job I don't hate and a house I'm not afraid in. Some days that feels like more than enough. You're right that words don't fix what happened, but they matter anyway. Your apology mattered. Your testimony mattered. What you're doing now matters. I don't forgive you. I'm not sure I ever will, but I see you trying to be better. And that counts for something. We're all just trying to survive what broke us and build something from the pieces. Maybe that's the only victory that exists. Take care of yourself. Do the work. Become the person you're trying to be. Serafina. She mailed the letter that afternoon, and then she went back to living. 1 year after the trial, all 7 women gathered in Phoenix for a reunion. None of them had planned, but all of them needed. They rented a small house through Airbnb, spent 3 days cooking together, laughing together, crying together, sharing stories about their new lives, their jobs, their families, their slow, painful journeys towards something that resembled peace. On the last night, they sat in the backyard under string lights someone had hung from the porch, drinking wine and talking about everything except what had brought them together, until Anna brought it up. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. Testifying, fighting back. All of it. The question settled over them like fog. Carmen spoke first. "Some days. The nightmares are worse since the trial. Like testifying opened everything back up. But Victor's in prison," Lucia said. "He can't hurt anyone anymore. That has to mean something." "It does," Isabella agreed. "But it doesn't fix us. We're still broken." Sophia shook her head. "We're not broken. We're cracked. There's a difference." "What difference?" Valentina asked. "Broken things can't hold anything. Cracked things still work. They just look different than before." Serafina had been quiet through the whole conversation. Now she spoke. "I don't regret it. Not for a second. We could have stayed silent, could have taken the settlement money and disappeared. But we didn't. We stood up. We told the truth. We made sure he answered for what he did. And now we have to live with the consequences," Carmen said softly. "Yeah, but we're living." Serafina looked around at the 6 women who'd become her sisters through shared trauma. "A year ago, I wasn't sure I'd make it. Now I have a son who laughs, a mother who visits, a job, a future. That's not nothing." Anna wiped her eyes. "When you put it like that?" "We won," Serafina said. "Not perfectly, not without scars. But we won. And he lost. And that matters." They sat together under the stars, 7 women who'd survived torture disguised as employment, who'd faced their abuser in court, who'd rebuilt their lives from nothing. They weren't heroes. They were tired, scared, still healing, but they were free. And freedom, real freedom, was worth every scar it cost them. 2 years after the trial, Serafina stood in a small community center in Phoenix teaching a workshop on labor rights for immigrant women. 20 faces looked back at her, some young, some old, all of them carrying stories of exploitation and survival. She told them about the bracelet, about the shocks, about the 4 months when her body forgot how to rest. She told them about fighting back, and she told them the truth, that justice was messy and incomplete and sometimes felt like losing even when you won, but it was still worth fighting for. After the workshop, a young woman approached her, maybe 23, nervous, hands twisting together. "I work for a cleaning company," she said in Spanish. "They make us wear these watches. They track everything. If we're too slow, they dock our pay. If we rest too much, they fire us. I don't know if it's legal. I don't know what to do." Serafina looked at her, saw herself 2 years ago, terrified, alone, unsure. She pulled out a business card for the nonprofit Marcus and Ronan had helped establish. Legal aid for labor trafficking victims. "Call this number," Serafina said. "Tell them everything. They'll help you. I promise." The young woman took the card with shaking hands. "You really think they can stop them?" "I know they can, because someone stopped the people who hurt me. And now I'm here helping you. That's how it works. We survive. We fight. We help the next person." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." Serafina hugged her, felt the same fear and hope she'd felt standing outside the federal courthouse 2 years ago. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "It won't be easy, but you'll make it through." The woman left with the card clutched in her hand like a lifeline. Serafina watched her go and thought about Victor Drax in his prison cell, about Ronan serving his time, about Celeste learning what accountability felt like, about the 7 women who'd survived and the hundreds more who would because they'd spoken up. The fight wasn't over. It would never be completely over. But it was winnable, one person at a time, one story at a time. One survivor finding the courage to say, "This happened to me and I'm not staying silent." Serafina gathered her materials, turned off the lights in the community center, and walked out into warm Phoenix sunshine. Her wrist was bare. No bracelet. No scars visible under her long sleeves. But she knew they were there, and she'd stopped being ashamed of them. Because scars were proof you'd survived something meant to destroy you. And survival, messy, painful, imperfect survival, was the only victory that truly mattered. She got in her car and drove home to her son, her mother, her small house, with the tree that had finally bloomed, to a life she'd built from ashes and courage and the stubborn refusal to let cruelty have the final word, The story didn't end with perfect healing. It ended with breath, with morning light, with a woman who'd been tortured for existing finally learning that rest wasn't something she had to earn. It was something she'd always deserved. And now, finally, impossibly, triumphantly, it was hers.